Imagine a house so old, even the trees around it seem to bend away in fear. A place hidden deep in the woods where no paths lead, no maps show, and no sane person dares approach after dark. Locals don't talk about it, hunters avoid it, and those who stumble upon it never return the same. The house in the woods. No one lives here, but something watches. This isn't just a tale passed down to scare kids around a campfire. This is a generational curse, a horror rooted deep in time, stretching its claws across bloodlines, one by one. 7 generations, 7 stories, all linked by the one house that watches, but never speaks until it chooses to. Do you believe in inherited fear? In something so evil it doesn't just haunt a place, but a name, a family? Would you spend a night in the house knowing no one lives there, but something watches? Tell me in the comments below, I dare you. Before we dive into the first generation, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who thinks they're not afraid of anything, because after this, they just might be. Now, let's begin. It was the autumn of 1892 when Isaac Whitmore vanished. He was a carpenter by trade, known across the small town of Briar's Hollow for his skilled hands and quiet demeanor. Isaac lived alone after the war, took his brother, and fever took his wife. With no one left, he kept to himself, working in the forest outside town, until one evening he didn't come back. The search party found his tools stacked neatly beside an old trail that led into the northern woods, a section the elders of the town called the Wound. The trees there grew twisted, clawing at each other like they were trying to escape the soil. Birds never sang in that part of the woods. Even in daylight, it looked like dusk. They found no body, no blood, just tracks leading deeper in, farther than any sane man should go. That was the last anyone saw of Isaac Whitmore, until 35 years later. 1917. Evelyn Whitmore, Isaac's niece, had just turned 19 when the letter arrived. Her father, Isaac's younger brother, had passed 2 years before. The letter came from a firm in town, tucked in the bottom of a stack of her father's old belongings. It read, "To Miss Evelyn Whitmore, if you are reading this, your family's land in Briar's Hollow remains untouched, but your inheritance is incomplete. One structure, built in the Northwood in 1891, was never claimed. If desired, you may reclaim it, but do so quickly. They don't like being forgotten." It was unsigned. Curiosity outweighed common sense. Evelyn, brave and stubborn, packed her bags and boarded a train headed back to Briar's Hollow, a town she hadn't seen since she was 6. The locals looked at her strange when she mentioned the Northwood. One older man at the inn leaned in close and whispered, "That place isn't yours, girl. It was never meant to be. Whatever lives there doesn't forget a name, and it knows yours." She brushed it off as small-town superstition. With an oil lantern, a revolver, and her father's compass, Evelyn followed the map from the letter. The trail leading to the Wound was overgrown but walkable. After 2 hours of hiking through silence, where even her breath felt too loud, she saw it. The house, 2 stories of rotting wood, leaning slightly as if weary from waiting. The windows were black and still, but the door was intact. A stone chimney jutted out like a broken spine. No one had lived here in decades, yet there were no signs of decay. Ivy clung to the porch rails like skeletal hands. Evelyn stepped forward. The door creaked open with a moan that didn't echo. The air was cold, dry, and heavy. The smell wasn't rot. It was older, like time itself had died inside. She wandered through the main room. Dust covered every surface, but there were no cobwebs, no insects. A table stood with 3 chairs, one pulled out. A coat rack still held an old canvas jacket. The walls held faded photographs, people she didn't recognize but whose faces made her skin crawl. Evelyn climbed the stairs. Each step groaned under her weight, but none broke. Upstairs, the hallway was lined with doors. One was cracked open. Light shimmered underneath, though she hadn't lit any candles. She reached for the knob. From behind the door, something whispered her name. "Evelyn!" She froze. Every part of her body screamed to run, But her hand moved anyway. The door creaked wider. Inside was a bedroom, untouched. A dresser, a bed, a mirror on the far wall, and in the center of the floor, a dark red stain. Not fresh, but not faded. Her lantern flickered. The whisper came again, but now it was outside the room. Footsteps, slow, wet. Her breathing quickened. She swung the door shut and leaned against it, heart hammering. From the other side came a soft knock. Then, "Go home." The voice was Isaac's. She had heard recordings of her great-uncle before. She remembered the way he said her father's name. In a reel-to-reel her father used to play. That voice was dead. It couldn't be real. Evelyn reached into her satchel, gripping the revolver. Her hands trembled. She cracked the door open, just enough to see down the hall. Nothing. No one. The hallway was longer than before. She was sure of it. 10, maybe 15 feet longer. Another door had appeared at the far end. Thicker, darker, with iron hinges. She hadn't seen that before. The lantern flickered again and died. Silence swallowed the house. She descended the stairs in total darkness, guided only by the memory of her steps and the damp chill brushing her skin. The house creaked, but not from the wind. These sounds were deliberate, heavy. Something was moving upstairs. Then from behind her, the faintest echo of breathing. Not hers. She spun around. Nothing. But the front door was now shut. She hadn't closed it. She rushed to it, turned the knob, pulled, pushed, kicked. It wouldn't budge. From the kitchen, a cabinet door slammed, then another, and another. The sounds cascaded like a storm. Drawers yanked open, chairs scraping across the floor. All at once. Then stillness. She turned to the living room and saw a figure standing by the fireplace. Tall, thin, shrouded in shadow. Its head tilted as if listening. Then it took a single step forward, revealing one detail. A mouth stitched shut with wire. Evelyn screamed and fired the revolver. Once, twice. The figure didn't move. She turned and sprinted up the stairs, heart in her throat, slipping in the dark. Behind her, the creak of wood. The figure followed, silent except for the whisper of its coat against the wall. At the top, she lunged toward the dark iron door and flung it open. Inside was not a room, but a spiral staircase descending into the earth. It pulsed red, like breathing walls. She looked back. The figure stood at the top of the stairs, watching, stitched smile stretched wide. She descended. She didn't stop. The house let her in. It would decide when to let her out. 1954. 17 years passed. Evelyn Whitmore was never seen again. Most believed she ran off, same as her uncle. The woods, they said, had a way of swallowing the Whitmore family whole. But stories whispered through Briar's Hollow, of a girl's scream heard on windless nights, of flickering lights deep among the black trees, and of footsteps that echoed through town with no one there to make them. Then came Jonas Whitmore, her nephew, 7 years old, pale and sickly, with deep blue eyes that rarely blinked. He had never met Evelyn, but sometimes he drew pictures of her face, said she spoke to him in dreams. Jonas and his mother, Miriam, moved into the Whitmore estate on the edge of town after his father died in a factory fire. The house was modest, brick, nothing like the ruin hidden deep in the woods. Miriam refused to speak about it. Every time Jonas asked, she grew distant, cold. But the boy was persistent. He spent hours at the local library digging through old maps, yellowed newspapers, family records. One day in the basement archives, he found a page ripped from a personal journal. No name, just a message written in shaky script. It speaks in silence, the house in the trees. It waits. It learns the names of blood. That night, Jonas began sleepwalking. Miriam found him outside just before dawn, standing barefoot at the edge of the forest. His lips moved, but no sound came. She called his name again and again until he blinked awake, confused and freezing. His feet were cut from thorns. His hands were muddy. He said he was talking to the wall people. He described them with childlike clarity. Tall, gray figures with skin like stone and no mouths, except the ones they carved into themselves. They never spoke, he said, but they whispered. only when you listened wrong. At school, Jonas grew quieter. Drawings filled his notebooks of trees with hands, houses with eyes, and staircases that bent the wrong way. Once his teacher found a page covered in black crayon, a single message scrawled over and over. "It sees me now." Miriam burned the page. She called the town priest. They prayed over his room, but the next morning his closet door was open. Inside, the same drawing, recreated in chalk on the wall, and beneath it, a message in Jonas's handwriting. "She's still there. She never stopped walking." 1 week later, Jonas vanished. Miriam left him drawing in the yard while she cleaned the dishes. 10 minutes, she swore. When she returned, the paper was still there. The crayons, his shoes, but no Jonas. The police searched for days. Dogs lost the scent at the northern trail. No footprints, no torn clothing, nothing. Until Miriam received a package, wrapped in brown paper, no return address. Inside, a cassette tape. Just white noise at first, then faint whispers, then slowly her son's voice, whispering her name over and over. "Mama, Mama." The doors open. The stairs go down. 1963. 9 years later, in a state-run children's hospital, Dr. Samuel Dry worked night shifts in the psychiatric wing. He was calm, pragmatic, a war veteran who didn't believe in ghosts or curses. He'd seen worse things in combat. That's what he told himself anyway, until the Whitmore boy was admitted. They found Jonas in a different town, across the state line, 9 years older, but not a day change. Still 7. Same height, same clothes. Except his eyes were black around the edges, like he hadn't slept in weeks. He wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat. They ran every test, blood work, scans, psych evaluations. Nothing abnormal, except one thing. Jonas didn't cast a shadow. Dr. Dry took personal interest in the case. Night after night, he sat in silence across from Jonas in a sterile white room. Occasionally the boy would hum, the same tune, a lullaby that didn't exist anywhere the doctor could trace. When asked where he learned it, Jonas finally whispered, "Evelyn sings it in the red room, but she doesn't remember her name anymore." He looked up, eyes wide. "She walks, always walks. If she stops, it finds her." When asked what it was, Jonas simply said, "The one with no mouth, but too many voices." That night, Dr. Dry listened back to one of the recordings he made of their session. Static, then soft music. The lullaby Jonas hummed, but beneath it he heard something else. A woman's voice, screaming. He stopped the tape, rewound, played again. Whispers layered beneath whispers, screaming, gurgling. The sound of nails on wood. The tape warped, cracked, and melted in his player. He never listened to another recording again. 3 weeks later, Jonas disappeared from the hospital. No cameras caught it. His door remained locked from the outside. But inside the room, the bed was made. The floor was wet. The walls were covered in bloody handprints, tiny ones like a child's. On the ceiling, scratched in jagged letters, "She's still walking." Miriam died 2 years later in a fire that gutted the Whitmore estate. But witnesses say she was seen the night before, wandering the woods, whispering to herself. Her final words, according to the priest who found her, "I saw her through the trees. She's smiling now, but not at me." The house in the woods remained untouched, but travelers began to report strange things. A sudden cold, the sound of footsteps behind them, a voice calling out in a child's tone, "Come play. I'm not alone anymore." The locals stopped hiking the northern trails. Then one morning the town awoke to see a thick fog rolling down from the woods, and at the edge of town, carved into the bark of every tree, we remember the name. 1978. The Whitmore family had not returned to Briar's Hollow for over 20 years, not since Jonas's disappearance. But the house in the woods had a way of pulling people back, whether they were willing or not. In 1978, a strange letter found its way to Charlotte Whitmore, the last living relative of the Whitmore bloodline. She was young, eager to prove herself, and naive enough to think she could break the chain of tragedies that haunted her family. The letter, delivered by an anonymous hand, was short but chilling. The house calls for you. Your bloodline is unfinished. Come home. Charlotte had never heard of the house in the woods. Briar's Hollow was a distant memory from her childhood, a place her parents had fled years ago, never to return. Her mother spoke of it only in hushed tones, as if mentioning it aloud would invite the kind of misfortune her family had endured. Yet when the letter arrived, Charlotte's curiosity overtook her caution. She decided to visit, convinced the house was just an old relic, nothing more than the imagination of superstitious townsfolk. But the closer she got to the town, the heavier the air seemed to grow. When Charlotte arrived at the gates of the Whitmore estate, something tugged at her, a feeling she couldn't quite place. The house wasn't just a structure, it was a presence. It waited, patient and silent, as if it had known she would come. Briar's Hollow was a different place than Charlotte remembered. The town was smaller now, quieter. Most of the stores were closed, their windows boarded up. The streets were empty. As she passed through the town square, an old woman sitting on the porch of the general store called out to her. "You're a Whitmore, ain't you?" Charlotte nodded. The woman's eyes darkened, as if the name itself were a curse. "You don't go up to the house, girl. It calls, yes, but it doesn't call for you to live. It calls to consume." Charlotte hesitated but smiled politely. "I'll be fine. I'm just here to see what's left. The house, my family's house." The woman shook her head. "There's nothing left but memories. Don't make the mistake of thinking you can finish something that was never meant to be finished." But Charlotte was determined. She thanked the woman and walked away, her mind set on discovering the truth. In Azava, as night fell, Charlotte stood before the house. The air was unnaturally still, and the moon seemed to hang too low in the sky. A fog, thick and oppressive, began to roll in from the woods. The house seemed to absorb the light, casting long, twisted shadows across the yard. The front door was slightly ajar. She stepped inside. The interior was much as it had been described, frozen in time, old furniture covered in dust, photographs of long-dead family members hanging crookedly on the walls. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the silence was almost unbearable. But something was different this time. There was a strange pulse in the house, a rhythmic thumping like the beating of a heart buried deep beneath the floorboards. Charlotte wandered through the rooms, drawn to a particular door at the far end of the hallway. It was familiar to her in a way that sent a chill down her spine. She opened it. Inside was a room she hadn't expected, a room that seemed to breathe. The walls were covered in strange symbols, etched deep into the wood, as if carved by nails instead of tools. The floor was stained, the carpet beneath her feet damp and cold. The far wall was bare, except for one thing, a mirror. But this mirror was no ordinary reflection. It shimmered with a strange oily sheen as if it was alive. Charlotte stepped closer, entranced by the swirling, inky surface. Her reflection shifted unnaturally, as though it wasn't her at all but someone or something else. The reflection, her face twisted, the edges distorting as though her own features were being pulled and stretched by invisible hands. She recoiled, heart racing, and that's when she saw it. Behind her in the mirror, something was standing in the shadows, a figure tall and slender with no features. Its face was smooth, empty, a void where eyes should have been. Its presence chilled the air, making her breath catch in her throat. Before she could react, the door slammed shut behind her. Charlotte spun around, frantic, but the room was empty. She was alone again, at least in body. But the house didn't leave her alone. The floor beneath Charlotte's feet began to tremble. The walls seemed to close in around her, the pulse of the house growing louder, more insistent. The symbols on the walls shifted, rearranging themselves into new patterns. Ones that Charlotte didn't recognize but felt in her gut were wrong. A loud crash echoed from above. Charlotte's heart skipped a beat. Something was moving in the attic. With no other choice, she rushed upstairs, following the noise that seemed to guide her, urging her to move faster, faster. The air grew colder as she approached the attic door. The knob was frozen to the touch, as if the house itself was trying to keep her out. But she didn't hesitate. She turned it with a force born of desperation, and the door creaked open. Inside, the attic was vast, cluttered with old furniture, boxes of forgotten belongings, and dust that danced in the beam of her flashlight. But what drew her attention wasn't the piles of forgotten things. It was the figure standing in the corner, its back to her. Charlotte froze, her throat tightening. The figure was familiar. Its shape, its posture was almost too familiar. It was Jonas, but not Jonas as she remembered him. His skin was pale and stretched tight, over bones that seemed to have grown too long. His eyes were wide and hollow, black voids that swallowed the light. He stood still, unmoving like a puppet with no strings. "Jonas," she whispered, stepping closer. He didn't respond. The pulse in the house grew louder, frantic now like the beating of 1,000 hearts. Then, without warning, Jonas turned. His mouth opened wide, impossibly wide, stretching as if it was trying to consume the very air around him. From within the blackness of his throat, a voice echoed, a chorus of voices, all speaking at once. "You're too late." The attic doors slammed shut behind her. The house had claimed another Whitmore. 1991. Briar's Hollow had been slowly dying, its population dwindling year after year. Most of the old families had moved away, seeking a future outside the shadow of the woods. Some never returned, but the stories of the Whitmore house persisted, whispered in hushed tones in darkened corners of the town. The locals had all but given up on trying to understand the house. But Liam Pierce, an outsider and an archaeologist, wasn't so easily dissuaded. Liam had arrived to Briar's Hollow, his mind fixed on one goal: to uncover the truth about the house in the woods. He had spent years researching the area, convinced that the Whitmore estate was built on land that was far older than the town itself. Ancient burial grounds, he thought. Perhaps something far darker, some curse or ritual long forgotten, lay hidden beneath the house's rotting floors. The journal entries, the whispers of the townsfolk, the reports of disappearances, they all pointed to something ancient, something that had never fully been understood. His arrival was met with cold stares. The town didn't like outsiders, especially those who came seeking answers. But Liam was determined. He rented a small cottage on the edge of the town and began his investigation. It didn't take long for Liam to make a disturbing discovery. One night, while poring over the old maps and town records in the library, he found an odd piece of information. Hidden among the archives was a document, a land deed dating back hundreds of years. It listed the ownership of the land that the Whitmore house sat on, but it also contained a strange clause, one that no one had bothered to explain. "This land is consecrated, bound by blood and earth. The house shall stand for eternity, and the name will be passed through the living and the dead. No outsider may enter without consequence." Liam's curiosity grew. Why had no one spoken of this? And what did it mean that the house was bound by blood and earth? The following night, Liam made his way to the house, armed with nothing more than a flashlight, a notebook, and a heavy sense of unease. The woods were thick with fog, and every step he took felt as though he were being pulled further into the earth. He reached the edge of the Whitmore estate as the moon rose high, casting long shadows across the front yard. The house was waiting. He entered the front door, which had once again been left ajar. The moment he stepped inside, the air grew thick with a sense of wrongness, like the house itself was alive and watching him. The floor creaked beneath his feet, the sound echoing through the empty halls. He moved cautiously, his flashlight scanning the room. The walls were adorned with old portraits, faces long gone but eyes that seemed to follow his every movement. The atmosphere was suffocating, oppressive. It felt as though the house was pressing in on him from all sides, urging him to leave. But Liam pressed on. He found the basement door almost immediately, the same door that so many others had descended into, the same door that had claimed those who came before him. But Liam, unlike the others, was determined to uncover what lay beneath. The stairs creaked under his weight as he descended into the depths of the house. The temperature dropped rapidly, his breath coming in visible puffs, as he stepped into the basement. It was just as he had read: rotten wooden planks, old crates, and scattered debris.
But there was one thing that stood out. The mirror. The same mirror that Ruth Kavanaugh had encountered. It stood against the far wall, covered in dust, its cracked surface gleaming in the dim light of his flashlight. Liam approached it, his hand trembling as he reached for the edge. The moment his fingers made contact with the glass, a jolt of cold surged through his body, and the mirror shifted. It wasn't just his reflection staring back at him. The faces of countless people, all twisted in agony, began to appear within the glass. They pressed against the surface, their mouths open in silent screams. Their eyes were hollow, empty, but they seemed to beg for help. Liam took a step back, heart pounding, but the mirror held him in place. He couldn't look away. The whispers began, low, muffled voices like a distant chant, rising from within the walls of the house. The words were indecipherable at first, but then they became clear. You've come to finish what was started. You can't leave, you belong here now. Liam recoiled, his mind spinning as he stumbled backward, but something stopped him, a presence, cold and suffocating. He turned, his flashlight swinging wildly, and for a brief moment, he saw something in the shadows, a figure, tall, thin, its face obscured by darkness. Liam's heart raced, the air grew thicker, pressing against his chest, as if the walls were closing in. The figure moved closer, its form distorting with every step, as though it was made of smoke and shadows. And then it spoke, its voice a low, hollow echo. You shouldn't have come. Liam's breath caught in his throat as the figure lunged forward, and in that moment, the house seemed to come alive. The ground beneath his feet began to tremble, and the walls seemed to shift, their angles warping into impossible shape. The air was thick with whispers, the voices of the lost, the dead, and those who had never left. Liam backed away, but the figure was relentless. It moved faster, closing the gap with terrifying speed, and as it reached for him, the room went dark. When Liam awoke, he found himself outside, lying in the overgrown yard. The sun had risen, casting a pale light over the house. He blinked in confusion, his head pounding, his body bruised. He could barely remember how he got there, but the memory of the figure, the whispers and the mirror still lingered in his mind. He stood, shaky and disoriented, and looked toward the house. The door was now tightly shut, and the windows were black, devoid of life. The air was still, too still. Liam took a step back, his legs weak, but something kept him from leaving. His eyes were drawn to the ground beneath his feet, where the earth had begun to crack. A faint, unnatural hum vibrated from the soil, and there, emerging from the roots of the trees, was something new. A hand made of dirt, rock, and roots, stretching from the earth like a claw, reaching for him.
1996. Briars Hollow was nearly abandoned now. The houses stood in various states of decay, the streets barely lit at night. Only a handful of residents remained, people who couldn't leave or perhaps in some twisted way didn't want to. For Maya Griffin, a psychiatrist from the city, Briars Hollow was the last place she ever imagined settling. She had come here on a professional assignment, drawn to the case of a young man, Mark Stevens, who had been found wandering the streets of the town in a state of absolute panic, his eyes wide with terror, his mouth babbling incoherent. Mark had been in a psychiatric hospital for weeks, but nothing seemed to help. He had been diagnosed with severe dissociation, but he insisted that it wasn't a mental condition. It was the house, the Whitmore house, and every time someone spoke of it, his fear would rise. Maya's colleagues had dismissed his claims as delusional, but Maya had always believed there was more to the story. She came to Briars Hollow hoping to understand the root of Mark's terror, and to try to help him find peace. But as she stood at the edge of the town, looking toward the dense woods, Maya realized she might be in over her head. The place felt wrong in a way she couldn't describe. A chill ran down her spine and an uneasy feeling settled in her gut as she glanced toward the looming silhouette of the Whitmore house in the distance. His eyes were bloodshot, and his hands trembled as he spoke. "You don't understand," Mark said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's still watching. It's waiting for me to come back.
The house. It's alive. I can't escape it. Maya sat across from him, her eyes studying his expression. There was a wildness in his gaze, but something in his words rang with a strange truth. She had seen this kind of fear before, unrelenting, primal. This wasn't just anxiety. It was something deeper, something that gnawed at the soul. "Tell me more about the house," she prompted gently. Mark's eyes darted toward the window, as if expecting the house to materialize at any moment. "It calls," he whispered. "It doesn't just call with sound. It calls with the earth, the trees, the wind. It's all connected. I tried to leave, but it found me. It brought me back." Maya leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "How did it find you?" Mark's voice faltered. "It's in the land. The roots go deep, deeper than you can imagine. They spread through the trees, through the ground. It pulls you back like a tide, relentless and unforgiving. Once it has you, you can't escape." Later that night, Maya couldn't shake Mark's words. The house was still there, looming in the distance, and it called to her in a way she couldn't explain. She found herself standing on the edge of the forest, staring at the twisted trees that surrounded the Whitmore estate. The fog was thick once again, just as it had been in the stories, and the temperature had dropped. Maya wasn't a superstitious person, but she couldn't deny that the place felt unnatural. There was something about it that gnawed at the edges of her mind, something that whispered to her even now. Despite her reservations, she found herself walking toward the house. The door was once again ajar as she approached, just as it had been for so many others before her. A soft wind blew through the trees, rustling the leaves, and the house seemed to exhale with a sigh, inviting her inside. Maya hesitated, but only for a moment. She stepped into the threshold. The interior was dark, suffocating. The air was thick with mildew and rot, and the smell of decay filled her nostrils. She could hear the soft creaking of the house, as if it were alive and breathing. Her flashlight flickered as she moved deeper into the house, its beam cutting through the darkness. The silence was unnerving. Nothing but the sound of her own footsteps, the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath her feet. Then she heard it, a low hum, faint at first, but growing louder. It seemed to come from deep within the house. She followed the sound, her heartbeat quickening as the noise intensified. It was rhythmic now, like a pulse, a heartbeat. And then she found it, the basement door. It stood before her, beckoning her with a sinister pull. She had read about it in the town records, how the house's strange energy seemed to emanate from the depths of the basement, from the earth beneath the floorboards. The townspeople had always warned against venturing down there. But Maya's curiosity was overpowering. She had to know the truth. The basement was colder than she had expected, the air thick with an oppressive weight that made it difficult to breathe. Her flashlight flickered again, but this time the darkness felt different. It felt like it was alive, swirling around her, closing in. Maya hesitated for only a moment before descending the stairs. As she reached the bottom, she found herself standing in a room unlike any other. It was vast and hollow, with thick, gnarled roots stretching across the floor and up the wall. The roots seemed to pulse, moving like veins beneath the earth, crawling across the wooden floorboards. In the center of the room was a stone altar, cracked and weathered. Bloodstains, old and dark, marred its surface, and above it, in the farthest corner, was the mirror. It wasn't just any mirror. The glass was covered in strange symbols, twisted and horrifying, as if carved into the surface by some unseen force. The reflection wasn't of the room. No, it was something else. A figure, a man, his face contorted in pain, standing in a room of darkness. His eyes were wide, staring into Maya's soul, and in that moment she realized who it was. It was Jonas Whitmore. The air in the basement grew thicker, the shadows swirling around her, pressing in. Maya's breath caught in her throat as the whispers returned, louder now, echoing off the walls. "You've come." The voice was familiar, and yet it was not. It seemed to come from all directions, from the roots, the walls, the very earth beneath her feet. The mirror pulsed with an unnatural light, its surface rippling like water. The figure of Jonas began to move, his mouth opening wide, releasing a silent scream. His face twisted in agony, and the roots beneath Maya's feet seemed to shift in response. She turned to run, but the basement door slammed shut, trapping her inside. The roots began to move faster, stretching out toward her, wrapping around her ankles, pulling her down. In that moment, Maya understood. The house was alive, and it wasn't just made of wood and stone. It was made of something older, something darker. The roots that spread through the earth were the house's lifeblood, its tendrils reaching into the very core of the land. And now, Maya was a part of it.
In 1899, the years had passed, but the truth of the Whitmore house continued to gnaw at the edges of Briar's Hollow, a town now almost completely forgotten by the outside world. There were only a few souls left in the town, survivors of the curse, those who had never dared to venture too far into the woods again. But there was one final person who could not resist the call. Ella Harper, a historian and researcher, had heard the rumors of Briar's Hollow from her colleagues, stories of strange disappearances, unsettling accounts, and of a house that no one had dared to live in for decades. Her curiosity piqued. Ella decided to visit, hoping to uncover the truth about the house, the land, and the horrors that seemed to follow it. But Briar's Hollow was a place that had been left behind by time, and the house was not a place where answers were found. No, it was a place that fed on the unrelenting curiosity of those who dared to understand it. Ella arrived late in the evening, the last rays of sunlight bleeding into the horizon as she approached the town. The houses were abandoned, the streets desolate. It seemed that no one had lived here for years, but the air still carried a sense of dread, a presence that never fully left. She parked her car near the edge of town, near the old church that had long since fallen to ruin, and gazed up at the darkened woods where the Whitmore house loomed in the distance. Her heart beat faster as she remembered the legends of the house, the ones that spoke of the people who had disappeared, the faces seen in the mirrors, the trees that were alive with malevolent intent. But Ella was determined. She had come for answers. The forest path was overgrown with thick vines and brambles, the trees so dense that they blocked out the moonlight, leaving her with only the faint beam of her flashlight to guide her steps. The sound of her footfalls echoed in the stillness, but there was something else, a rustling sound that seemed to move with her, as if something were watching her every step. Ella couldn't shake the feeling that she was not alone. The Whitmore house appeared before her just as foreboding as the stories had described. Its windows were dark and hollow, like empty eyes staring into her soul. The front door, rotted with age, hung slightly open, inviting her inside. It was then that she remembered the warnings. No one ever returned from the house. People who entered the woods, people who ventured too close, had never come back. But Ella couldn't stop herself. She stepped forward, her legs trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement. The door creaked as she pushed it open, and the stench of decay hit her immediately. Dust and mildew filled the air. The house groaned as if waking from a long slumber. Ella walked through the threshold, her flashlight sweeping across the room, revealing the remnants of a once grand house. But everything was broken, the walls peeling away like old skin. The furniture was rotted and covered in thick layers of dust. But what struck her most was the feeling of the house, its oppressive presence, as if it were alive, breathing, waiting. She made her way deeper into the house, her steps echoing through the dark halls. She could hear the whispering, faint at first, but it grew louder as she moved forward. The whispers were indecipherable, but there was a tone to them, something urgent, pleading, and yet threatening. Ella reached the staircase, and as she descended, the temperature seemed to drop. Her breath formed visible clouds in the cold air. She stepped onto the bottom floor, and the basement door was there just like it had been for the others before her. But something was different now. The air hummed with an unnatural energy, the walls vibrating slightly, like the house was waiting. Ella opened the basement door. The moment she stepped inside, the whispers intensified. Her flashlight flickered, revealing the roots that twisted across the floor. They were thick, gnarled, and pulsating, as if they were alive, breathing beneath the floorboards. At the center of the room stood the mirror. It was larger than she had expected, its surface reflecting the room in distorted angles, like a twisted funhouse mirror. But something else reflected in the glass. A face. It wasn't just any face. It was Jonas Whitmore's face, twisted in agony. His eyes were wide, pleading,
but they seemed to follow her every movement, as if he were trying to communicate. Ella stepped closer, her heart racing. She reached out a trembling hand toward the mirror, her fingers brushing the surface. The moment she touched it, the room around her seemed to warp. The ground beneath her feet cracked open, and the roots surged upward, wrapping around her legs, pulling her toward the mirror. The whispers became louder, the words clearer now, echoing in her mind. You've come to finish what was started. Ella's eyes went wide with realization. The house didn't just watch. It fed on those who entered, trapping them within its walls, feeding on their fear, their souls, and now she was part of it. The mirror cracked. Suddenly the room was alive with movement. The roots twisted and writhed, their tendrils like hands reaching for her, tightening around her limbs. Ella screamed as she tried to pull away, but the roots were too strong. They dragged her toward the mirror, her vision blurring as the world around her shifted. And then the room went dark. When Ella woke, she was no longer in the basement. She was standing in the center of the room, facing the mirror. But the reflection wasn't her own. It was Jonas Whitmore, his face twisted in a silent scream. His eyes locked onto hers. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. Her body felt heavy, as if the house itself was pulling her down, holding her in place. The mirror shifted again, revealing faces, hundreds of them, all twisted in agony, their eyes wide with fear, their bodies writhing as they tried to break free. They couldn't, and neither could she. The roots stretched out from the mirror, their tendrils reaching for her, pulling her toward the glass. And Ella realized with chilling certainty that she was no longer an observer. She was part of the house, part of the endless cycle of horror that had started so many years ago. The house in the woods had claimed another, and it would always watch. The house in the woods, no one lives here, but something watches. Thank you for taking this terrifying journey with me. What do you think? Would you ever dare to visit a place like Briar's Hollow? Or would you be content to let the secrets of the house remain buried in the woods? Leave a comment below and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more spine-chilling tales.